Well, President Trump called him a dictator and suggested he started the war with Russia. Now, Ukrainian President Zelenskyy is scheduled to meet face-to-face with him on Friday with a key deal hanging in the balance. The leaders are set to sign an agreement for the U.S. to get a chunk of profit from Ukraine's rich deposits of natural resources as payback for U.S. military support. This would mean that the U.S. has access to Ukraine's extensive underground mineral reserves, including lithium for things like batteries and cobalt that's used for things like jet engines. And then there's rare earth mineral scandium, which, in case you're wondering, is used for things like plane parts. But Zelenskyy says the agreement contains no security guarantees, which is critical for the survival of his country. And he's suggesting that he won't accept a ceasefire if his demands are not met. Gracelin Baskaran is the director of the Critical Mineral Security Program, CSIS, here in Washington, and is actually writing a book on the international strategy for critical mineral engagement and the U.S. So, Gracelin, the big unknown here is the scale of Ukraine's rare earth reserves and how long it would actually take to find them. So why is Trump, you think, in your opinion, staking a peace deal on this?
Minerals policy has become the bedrock of President Trump's foreign policy. We've seen it from the very beginning when he talked about annexing resource-rich Canada, when it was rare earths in Greenland, rare earths in Ukraine. The big thing about the U.S. in the last 5 years is that we have rapidly worked to reduce our reliance on China for these rare earths. They currently process about 90% of the world's supply. We in the U.S. have spent $300 million through our Defense Production Act to build rare earths processing facilities, but we don't actually have a lot of rare earths at home. We have less than 1.5%. So we are now looking to source rare earths from around the world, and Ukraine has become the recent mining jurisdiction he's now looking at.
So what is it that Ukraine could have, Gracelin, that would make waiting for the rare mineral exploration and revenue that it could bring worth it?
Ukraine has a range of minerals, but the rare earths are particularly attractive to the U.S. for a couple of reasons. First of all, rare earths are used in virtually every defense technology. They're in warships, fighter jets, lasers, missiles, tanks, munitions. They're also in various energy technology and advanced semiconductors. That is really, if you look at President Trump's rhetoric, what he's focusing on. But they also have uranium, which is aligned with President Trump's ambitious nuclear goals, graphite, coal, titanium, which is really instrumental for defense technologies. So President Trump's looking to hedge a long-term bet, but it's a very long-term bet because the mining sector is very nascent in Ukraine.
Okay, so then let's talk about the mining sector. So if a deal were to be made and the U.S. gets to put mining companies in country, would they be at risk, you think, with Russia looking over their shoulders? I mean, it's a fragile situation clearly right now in Ukraine.
Absolutely, especially now that Putin has said he's willing to try and work his own minerals deal, not only with minerals in Russia, but minerals on Russian occupied land. So we certainly see that there's a certain fear there. The industry is very young. The majority of the industry with minerals in Ukraine were mapped 30 to 60 years ago by the Soviet Union. We don't have a modern mapping of resources like rare earths in Ukraine, number one. Two, mining is a generational industry. It takes, from the time I find a deposit, on average globally, it's 18 years before I have a producing mine. And then third is, just as you said, I mean, the new draft agreement doesn't actually have a security guarantee. And so for a lot of companies who would potentially be looking to invest, the idea of making a 20-year investment before you even see a resource in a place where land expropriation has become a little bit of the norm over the last 11 years is a bit scary.
So now I think you're just explaining it in a way that the average person can understand the importance of this and the interest in it clearly. And we had to do a little digging, but we did find it was back in 2007. So let's talk about mineral diplomacy. If it works, does it work? 2007, China and the Democratic Republic of the Congo reached this historic resource for infrastructure deal that granted Chinese companies access to cobalt, copper, other minerals in return for infrastructure. How's that been working out? And should the U.S. be doing more foreign policy deals like this?
President Trump is taking a page out of that policy playbook. Basically, at that point in time, the DRC was immediately post-conflict, and there weren't a lot of countries who were willing to provide that aid and support. So China went in; they got a great deal in terms of access to resources. And to this day, every major copper and cobalt asset, there's only actually one company, Glencore, that has a majority non-Chinese investment there. So what we've seen is that China essentially owns majority ownership of the vast majority of assets in the DRC. And so they've basically managed to crowd out others. And again, the DRC has fantastic resources. So it's worked very well. Now, the DRC is tracking what is happening in Ukraine very closely right now. Last week, we saw the president, Tshisekedi, in the DRC ask for his own minerals for aid deal, given the ongoing conflict with Rwanda. So the world is kind of looking at what's going on there, but importantly, what they want to do different, what we need to do differently in Ukraine is a couple of years ago, the DRC actually wanted to go renegotiate the terms of that 2007 agreement, realizing they weren't getting a very good deal for their resources. So Zelenskyy has actually been very strategic, trying to negotiate the best deal.
Gracelin Baskaran, CSIS, thank you so much, and definitely look forward to your book. We'll be talking again.
Thank you for having me.